By the mid-20th century, Los Angeles had its share of crime bosses. But unlike New York or Chicago, the mob in LA always operated in a quieter way. It wasn't that the city didn't have organized crime, it did, but it blended differently into the fabric of Southern California. The West Coast mob was smaller, less flashy, and often overshadowed by bigger syndicates back east. Still, in Los Angeles, the mob ran rackets in gambling, loan sharking, extortion, and labor unions. And for decades, law enforcement could never quite pin them down. That changed when the FBI started listening, literally. Wiretaps became the tool that exposed how these families worked, who controlled what, and how money flowed through the city's shadows. For years, the FBI struggled to prove what everyone already suspected. The Dragna family, first led by Jack Dragna from the 1930s to the 1950s, was officially recognized as the Los Angeles branch of the American Mafia. Dragna was low profile compared to the flamboyant Bugsy Siegel or the brash Mickey Cohen, but he quietly controlled bookmaking and extortion rackets, reporting up to the National Commission of Mob Bosses. Leadership passed on, but the family never achieved the same dominance as its East Coast counterparts. Instead, the Los Angeles mob often had to take cues from Chicago or New York, acting more like an outpost than a capital. That smaller profile made it hard to catch them. For a long time, the LAPD had a reputation for either looking the other way or being compromised by corruption. Certain officers took payoffs, while others claimed the mob in LA wasn't a big deal. Chief William Parker, who reshaped the LAPD in the 1950s, focused more on street-level policing and on reforming the department's image than on organized crime. This left a gap. Mob figures could operate quietly, without the kind of full-force scrutiny seen in other cities. But by the 1970s and 1980s, times were changing. Nationally, the FBI was under pressure to dismantle organized crime. The RICO Act of 1970 gave prosecutors new tools to go after crime families as organizations, not just individuals. And wiretaps, the practice of secretly recording conversations, became central. Unlike testimony, unlike surveillance, a wiretap gave juries something undeniable: the mobster's own words. In Los Angeles, this strategy was transformative. The FBI began targeting not just low-level operatives, but also the lawyers, accountants, and middlemen who kept the rackets running. A major focus became the Milano family, who had inherited pieces of Dragna's old empire. Brothers like Peter and Carmen Milano were not household names, but inside mob circles, they represented the last serious attempt to keep a mafia family strong in Southern California. They operated out of Beverly Hills homes and San Fernando Valley businesses, keeping ties with East Coast bosses. The problem for the FBI was that the Milanos were discreet. They didn't run around with flashy cars like Cohen had. They didn't flaunt their power. So the FBI bugged phones, wired up informants, and began collecting hours of taped conversations. These wiretaps revealed the kind of day-to-day talk that mobsters thought was private. Discussions about gambling profits, union disputes, debts that needed collecting, and the role of lieutenants like Mike Rizzatello, a violent loan shark and hitman who operated under the LA family's banner. One of the ironies of these wiretaps is that the mob had long avoided written records for fear of exposure. Orders were passed face-to-face, deals were made in whispers, but as technology advanced, even careful criminals slipped. A phone call from a payphone, a bugged backroom, a tapped line in a Beverly Hills office, all became part of the FBI's arsenal. What agents uncovered was not just who was running the family, but also the simple fact that LA's mafia was still active, despite decades of claims that it was weak or dying. By the mid-1980s, the evidence piled up. Wiretap transcripts showed Peter Milano giving orders and discussing profits. The FBI didn't just have suspicions anymore, they had voices on tape. In 1984 and 1985, indictments followed. Dozens of figures tied to the Los Angeles family were arrested in a series of raids. For prosecutors, the wiretaps were gold. Juries didn't have to trust an informant's word. They could hear the bosses themselves. These trials marked a turning point. Many of the convictions stuck, and leaders like Milano faced long sentences. Rizzatello, already infamous for violence, ended up serving life in prison after being convicted of attempted murder in 1988. By the 1990s, federal authorities declared the Los Angeles crime family severely weakened, some even calling it defunct. While smaller rackets survived, the days of Jack Dragna and Milano running an influential mob organization were over. The wiretaps did more than just end careers. They changed how Los Angeles saw itself. For decades, Hollywood films had glamorized mobsters, from the sharp suits to the smoky backrooms. In real life, the tape stripped away the mystique. What people heard were ordinary men talking about debts, violence, and payouts, not masterminds, but criminals protecting income streams. It made the Mafia less romantic and more mundane, more of a business that used fear and crime as tools. And for law enforcement, it reshaped strategy. The FBI proved that electronic surveillance could succeed where traditional methods failed. Going forward, whenever organized crime was suspected in Los Angeles, whether in drug trafficking, labor racketeering, or other enterprises, wiretaps became the default tool. The city learned that the best way to expose hidden networks was not just to watch, but to listen. The legacy of those cases still matters. Los Angeles today doesn't have the same mafia presence it once did, but organized crime hasn't disappeared. It's changed forms, with international cartels, cybercrime, and new kinds of syndicates. Yet the blueprint for how to investigate them comes in part from what happened in the 1980s when the FBI's microphones caught LA's mob talking to itself. When we talk about why wiretaps mattered, it's not just about the convictions, it's about the way they shifted power. For years, mob families relied on secrecy, knowing that what wasn't seen couldn't be proved. Wiretaps ended that era. They took private voices and made them public record. In doing so, they cracked the shell of protection that had allowed organized crime to thrive in Los Angeles. That's why the story of the FBI's wiretaps in LA still resonates. It wasn't about glamour or shootouts. It wasn't about gangsters gunned down in alleys. It was about patience, technology, and listening. It showed that even in a city built on illusions, sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't what you see, it's what you hear.